way. I'm going to just share my screen now. Hopefully it will let me do that. I can't see anyone, but can you see the screen now?
Yes, we can.
You can, yep. Perfect, thank you. Okay, great. So hopefully you're all here today because you're interested in social care future and how you can be a really important part of our work moving forwards. So, thank you for being a part of Social Care Future family. It really is about the people that make Social Care Future so special. So it's great that you're all here today. So today, really what we want to just tell you is who we are, what we've done, what makes us different, and what we want to do moving forwards. We've got 3 big things that we want to share with you. And then really it's about having a discussion about how you can support the movement going forwards. And there's lots of different options for that that we'll go into details later on. So what is Social Care Future? Hopefully, I'm sure you've all seen us before and seen this vision, but we are all about people having good, ordinary lives, right? It's about us just being able to get on with our lives. And really what we wanted to do was talk about social care in a really different way. So often you hear the sector talking about numbers of beds or about 15-minute care visits, and we wanted to talk about people's lives and bring it back to people. And at the heart of Social Care Future has always been people who actually draw on social care themselves. This idea that actually this is our lives and we should be part of that conversation. We also have many people in the movement who themselves don't draw on social care, and that really strengthens us. We need both parts of that. But really at the heart was that actually people who draw on social care, all people who draw on social care or their families should be involved in these conversations. We're not a formal organisation. We started really almost as a sort of slight sort of protest and a bit of a kind of spontaneous thing, and now we've got 4 conveners and we're hosted by In Control, but we are more a kind of place for people with common aims and goals and people who support that vision to all meet together and to try and work together. We're very much focused on trying to reach that vision for everyone's lives. We know there's a long way to go to get there, but we're trying to offer solutions for this so that we're not just saying everything is rubbish. We're actually saying, actually, how can we make this vision a reality for people? We're certainly quite ambitious, and we're not going to apologise for that. I think at times people have said, oh, well, it's so far away, how can that ever happen? But actually, if we don't aim high, nobody else is going to. And certainly in my life, that is what I want from my life, that vision. So we're coming together, we are trying to make this stuff happen now, and that's where you will play your part. I'm sure many of you already have, and many of you will moving forwards. So my slides aren't moving on again. Okay, so I said we had three big things to tell you about. The first one is about changing the story, so you'll hear from Neil. Then I'll talk about the inquiry and how we're offering solutions. And then the third part will be talking about building a movement, because we think that these 3 things are really key to actually making the vision a reality. So what have we done so far? We co-produced that vision with people who draw on social care, with families, with people who work in social care, anybody. And we're really proud of that vision. And I think it really speaks so powerfully because it applies to anybody's lives. We've been finding these practical glimpses of the future and trying to link them up and trying to show that actually it's not all about money. Things can be different with a different attitude and a different way of working. And we've also been challenging where we see things are not being done well. And certainly recently, our most recent challenge has been around places where there's conferences with no people with lived experience speaking or attending, because we feel that actually lived experience voice needs to be heard. And I think we can be really pleased as a movement that actually we've come together very strongly and we are starting to have some quite powerful influence. Martin now meets with the senior leaders team meeting on a Friday afternoon with some of the senior leaders from social care. We do get asked to attend a lot of things now, and we are starting to see some influence. But I think if we want to achieve the ambition, which would be that that vision is at the heart of any reform and people are experiencing that, then we need to get more ambitious and we need to really be tactical about our next steps. And that's what we want to talk to you about today. So I'm going to hand over to Neil, who's going to talk to you about changing the story. Are you there, Neil?
I am, sorry.
Right.
All the dangers of using a new platform, we're all a bit befuddled. I apologise for that. So thanks, Hannah. Yeah, one of the I think many of you on this call in some way or another are already aware of it. A number of you may have already supported it, but one of our early insights really was that we were going to face a real challenge moving towards this vision with the current public story of social care. And we published a report in November 19 which mapped that story. And I guess the quickest summary of it was that social care was overwhelmingly talked about and thought about as looking after vulnerable people that couldn't look after themselves, which obviously is completely at odds with our vision of people being supported to live the lives that they choose to lead. But it was also very much a story of a system in crisis that was broken, that needed to be fixed, with very few solutions or a sense of possibility, save the need for government to provide more funding. And having looked at what other social movements had been doing to try and reframe narratives, we felt that the narrative that was dominant at the time was not serving us very well. So we've been setting out to change that. And on the screen there, you'll see the first bit of artwork we had done when we began in 2018, which has we've used all the way through. Is really, really nice, but it was designed to kind of give you a sort of sense of this being relevant to everybody, to get over some of the othering that tends to dominate this debate as well. But if I could have the next slide, Anna. So this is the vision. This is also something that you hopefully are familiar with. This was something that a number of us, about 80 of us, gathered in Manchester and talked about what we wanted social care to be, what it meant to us, and we distilled it into this vision. And this has proved pretty popular, really. It's already something that has been adopted or adapted by a number of organisations, whether the local government association, the Alzheimer's Society, Liz Kendall uses it frequently, we're told. The two chairs of the all-party parliamentary group on social care, Damien Green and Helen Hayes, have said it's their preferred vision for the future. So it's obviously kind of inspired people and given them a sense of focus. This is just a headline of our vision. Obviously, we provide a lot more detail than that in terms of how we imagine social care working most effectively to achieve those things for people. But what we've been doing over the last year is a further piece of research with an organisation called Equally Ours and a public audience research organisation called Survation to really get to grips with how do we build support for our vision and for our ideas. How do we both shift mindsets, so change the way people think about social care, their assumptions about it, their expectations of it, but also the degree to which they lend their support for change. And well, the good thing to say is that it's worked, and we're about to bring out our research and our guidance next week. And I'm going to give you a bit of a flavour about what some of the impact was now, if we have the next slide on that. So we did both qualitative and quantitative research, which was really a process of coming up with a hypothesis about the sort of message we thought might work, and then subjecting it to discussion with what's called the kind of conflicted public audience. Those are kind of people, members of the public, who tend not to be particularly ideologically focused on one political party or another, or can hold sometimes competing beliefs and ideas about issues. But that also means that they're a group that it's interesting to explore with the sorts of ideas that kind of move them in one direction or another. So we did a number of focus groups, what's called the co-creation forum, and then we did a survey of about 3,000 adults late last year. Following that survey, after people were exposed to our messages and our narrative, they were more likely to regard social care as important to themselves and those close to them, as benefiting both those who need support and the wider community, as a greater priority for government above other areas of policy, second only to the NHS, as more worthy of investment by central government, and also that they were more optimistic. They had a stronger sense that it was possible to reform social care in a better and more sustainable way now. And go to the next slide, Anna. The important thing is that the route to that was telling them our story, which was completely different from this story of looking after vulnerable people who can't look after themselves. And in fact, one of the biggest effects it had on mindsets, which people were half as likely to associate social care with paternalistic ideas such as vulnerability, having been exposed to our messages and narrative, and significantly more likely to associate with themes and ideas such as independence, community and relationships. And more people also agree with the statements that social care is about how people having the support to live how, where and with whom they choose to, that social care draws together relationships and support. And also, I think this was a really crucial thing, that living how we choose to live is dependent on the strength of our relationships that we have. The next slide, Anna. So we're about to bring that research out and guidance on how to use it. So there'll be a number of resources, but this is really a starting point. What we're publishing next week, lots of things you can use directly, but we're not presenting it as a script. This is a framework for how we can all communicate much more effectively about social care. But we want to build on that. So what next? Well, first of all, we'd obviously like you all to draw on that work. It's there for everyone. It will only have an impact if we all begin to use it and adapt it to our own ends. We can offer you advice and support on how to change the stories that you tell. We may need to ask you to resource that if that's what you want to do. We have pretty much spent up all our budget on this work, which many of you kindly donated to you. But we've already begun to talk to a few organisations about their messaging and the way they talk about things. And as I said, you can already see either all of this vision or elements of it being used in various people's communications now, so that's good. We'd really like some support in helping to bring it to others who perhaps can't afford that kind of support. So, for example, in London, Trust for London, the grant giver, provides workshops from Equally Ours, with whom we work, to all of its grantees on framing strategic communications. We'd love to be able to do that to some of our members and some of our networks, to be able to deliver either free or low-cost workshops with Equally Ours. So if you felt that was something you were able to support us to do, should be relatively inexpensive, and that would be fantastic. We're going to talk about the development of our website later, but we'd really like to develop and build a sort of broader how to talk about social care content on a website. So obviously we're starting next week with the guidance, with some top tips in a blog and various other bits and pieces. But what we'd really like to do is build on that. So start showing people examples of how social care has been talked about in a different way. We'd love to do some work on visual storytelling, which we've only done a little bit of, but photography, art, video, stories, a whole range of things. So we'd love to be able to build on what we've done. So any support people were able to give to those ends would be really welcome. Similarly, supporting further message research and development. As I said, this is a starting point. We're about to do a piece of work thinking how our work very much emphasises the vision where we want to go, but we do need to do some more work on how we frame the current problems in a way that create a sense of urgency and need to act, but in a way that supports this broad vision rather than detracts from it. And the other thing that we're interested in doing is hosting an event to support the use and uptake of it, as well as to get the messages and the ideas of social care future more firmly into the wider debate around reform, of which a future narrative and a vision is part. So there's a possibility of an event with the think tank New Local that we're talking to them about, which is a sponsorship opportunity for any of you as well, if you're keen to do that. Can I have the next slide, Anna? But just to say, in terms of what next, and we're going to move on to movement building, we are really struck at the ambition of what's happened in other countries. I think many of you on this call will be familiar with the Every Australian Counts campaign. But in America, in the USA last weekend, there was a rally on Saturday by the Care Can't Wait coalition, which ended with the Vice President talking about social care. President Biden has just committed $400 billion to home care, describing it as essential infrastructure and part of the American jobs creation scheme. And here you have Melinda Gates tweeting about that campaign, which is $20 million, which is actually quite modest by US standards, but huge by our own. But maybe we need that real ambition if we really are going to change things for the future, and other people around the world are giving us inspiration right now. So that's me. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I had to forget this, but special preview. I showed you the piece of art at the beginning. We've been back to the artists we work with to commission some new art, which shows how our story is moving on. So we hope you like it, but we'll be sharing this all more widely next week. Thanks.
Thank you, Neil. Hopefully see me again. So I'm going to talk about the Social Care Future Inquiry, which is entitled Whose Social Care Future, or Whose Care Is It Anyway? And we started this for a few reasons, and it's got a few purposes, but it's already had a lot of attention and gained quite a lot of traction. So we're really pleased with how it's progressing. One of the reasons we set it up was to offer solutions. We thought that actually we need to be saying to the sector what we think needs to happen and be proactive and offering these solutions, but that actually it needs to be clear that these are what people think needs to happen and their allies. We wanted to rebalance the power. So often we would see debates were happening, conferences happening, meetings happening, and either nobody with lived experience was there, or one token person gets invited at the end, or, you know, I'm on a panel and therefore they think that that's it. And actually we're saying, no, people with lived experience need to be at the heart of this discussion. So this was actually about us saying, we're not just going to be consulted, we are actually going to lead this inquiry. We'll hear from much wider than just people with lived experience directly, but it's about us showing actually we are much more than just people that draw on social care. We want to be a powerful voice in this reform sort of debates and the post-COVID debates that are happening this year. We know that the government are looking into reform, and we need to make sure that our vision is at the heart of that, and that people's lives, you know, this is being heard, because so often the sector is not talking this way. And we want to make sure that the inquiry informs our work as Social Care Futures moving forwards. I'll talk more about that in a moment. So this is the inquiry group. I'm also a member of the group, and we tried to get as wide a group as possible, variety of different experiences, some family carers, we've got somebody with dementia, somebody with learning disabilities. We've tried to go across the board. We're covering working age adults as well as older age, because again, so often you only hear about one or the other, and actually fundamentally at whatever stage of life we're at, we want to be in control of our lives, we want to have a good life, and we want to be able to have those connections that really matter and make us who we are. So it's a really great group of people. Some people there have a lot of experience in this field, some people quite new to talking about social care, so that's really good in itself. And where have we got to so far? So we went out to a public kind of, I suppose normally they'd call it a consultation, for 6 weeks in January and February, and we tried to give a lot of different options for people to get in touch with us. So there was a survey, there was a plain English version of the survey, but there were also Zoom sessions that people could come on and tell us what they thought. There was a session at our festival last year, and so we have heard, we think, from over 500 different people, some with lived experience, some who work in the sector, some who are just people, citizens who care about social care. Anybody was welcome to tell us what they thought needed to change to make the vision a reality. So now we are in the process, with help from some academics at Manchester Met University, in looking at that data and actually trying to draw out key themes. And we're hoping that we will, by the end of May, have those key themes in a way to present them. And they will be public. And then we will enter some sort of phase 2, which will look at more deeply at some of those themes. This whole process is being co-produced as we go along. So it's very much about, you know, we didn't start with a clear direction of travel. This is being co-produced with that group. So phase 2 is still to be kind of finalised. But I think moving forwards, we will need some support from our wider movement. And there's lots of different ways that we would like support and that you can be involved. We want this to have really strong impact, so we will need support from our networks and our members, you all, in promoting the findings of the inquiry and raising up the voice of people with lived experience. We want to have some events, so it may be that you want to sponsor events, or you might have skills or staff who are good at, I don't know, making videos, and if we decide we want to make a film, you might be able to offer us some support with that, or financing some of those things. And also there's co-production costs and admin time that we really desperately need as the inquiry. So there's lots of ways that you as an organisation or an individual can support the inquiry, either in time or in finances moving forwards. So now I'm going to pass over hopefully to Kat. I know we've been having some technical issues, so I'm hoping you're there, Kat. Is anybody there? If not, then I think your colleague, Kat's colleague Ali, is hopefully going to talk to us about the other part of our 3 things. Oh, hello.
Can you hear me now?
I can, so I just need to get this.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're quite quiet, but
Shall we give Kat 1 more minute, or shall I step in?
Ali, I think it might be best if you took, because I can't hear Kat. I'm assuming no one else can.
I think she's trying to talk through Neil's phone because she's having some laptop issues, but here we are. So I'm going to talk through Kat's slides and my slides. So I'm Ali Walker-Davies, and I'm from an agency called Forward Action, and we specialize in digital mobilization. And Kat, who is meant to be speaking through this slide, is one of the leading people in the country at creating movements and doing mobilization for progressive causes. So she is a great person to speak to, and I will try and do justice to her slides. Why are we talking about building movement? Well, I think the work that you guys have been doing is absolutely amazing, and the way that this is set up as a grassroots organization that's starting to kind of, like you say, use lived experiences to tell these stories is so powerful, but it's going to be even more powerful the more people you have behind you. So the idea of building the movement is creating ways to bring as many people as on board as possible to amplify your voice and put more social pressure on the people who are going to be making decisions, whether that's companies, whether that's government, looking to really kind of drive things up the agenda. So that's why we are looking to build a movement here. And this is something that kind of we talk about a lot, and our work at Forward Action does a lot. Should we go on to the next slide? This is like slide roulette. Okay, here we go. Building a movement. What we need for a movement, and we talk a lot about it, and you kind of, companies are now trying to build a movement, everyone's trying to build a movement, you guys are actually doing it and living it in a very authentic way, and that's because a movement needs certain things to work. It needs a vision to believe in, and your vision is fantastic, and the fact that it's already being organically picked up by people shows that there's real potential there for this to get huge traction. It needs a credible plan on how we go about delivering that, and that's where kind of the academic research and everything that you're building into this gives you that kind of that authority and that credibility so that people can get behind it. You need shared values that people can subscribe to, which is absolutely what you are displaying here. And the next thing is that you need actions for supporters to take. So what can people do that's going to help advance that movement? And the people on this call today have a really important action to take, which is to help fund this and drive this forward. But actually, there's more ways for people to get involved. There's things that people can be doing around lobbying local government, local MPs, looking at how do you kind of reach out to the decision makers, and also how can we kind of be collecting more of those lived experience stories to amplify and share. And the other thing a movement need is inspiring leaders, and that's what this organization is looking to build together, or kind of the collective that you are. So this is what we want to build a movement. If we move on to the next slide. You then need a plan, and you need to have a kind of momentum. You need to build that momentum. It's kind of momentum, lowercase m, but what we're looking to do here is kind of look at how are you going public. So you need to have that launch plan, but then have surges of activity. And in order to kind of really build that momentum, you need to make sure there are plans in place to sustain and transform. And if you look at successful movements over time, you're kind of actually the time that it takes to achieve some of this stuff is getting shorter, because digital, which is the area that Forward Action specializes in, is making this stuff happen a lot quicker. And so I think on the next slide, potentially, yes, this is one of my favorite examples of how really quick and impactful a movement can gather and accelerate when you capture people's attention. So with this, we've got a leader in Marcus Rashford who has lived experience, so he has a credible reason to talk about it. And last year, he was like the bane of the government's life and really, really driving change because he could talk about this with passion. He had a platform that meant that he was able to reach out to people, but he had something that people could universally agree with. So those shared values that meant that people were able to tap into that. And he gave people things to do. So whenever there was something coming out of the government about kind of, oh, it's another school holiday, oh, we're not going to be paying for school meals again, he was straight away there asking people to do things, whether that was to donate to local food banks, or whether it was to put pressure on their local MPs, or whether it was to sign a petition. But he had meaningful actions that people could take, and he was able to feed back really quickly and say, look, we've done this, we've achieved this, and being very authentic and human in his way he communicated there. So like that's kind of the pinnacle, and also the speed with which he was able to react to those things. Like obviously, we don't have Marcus Rashford's platform, but we do have stories that cut through, and the fact that you're able to start getting these stories told in the media means that we are already building that momentum. And one of the things is you need to make people aware of the issues and aware of the conversation and start that conversation, and then give them somewhere to turn to. And so that's where, as an organization, you can start to be the central point and central focus point of that. And then giving people actions to take. So getting them, making sure that we're listening to the network, highlighting the stories that are happening, and making sure it's kind of, makes this from a kind of more niche issue to a national conversation, finding the big things and giving opportunities to act there. So this is some examples here just covered around the kind of women's movement, around the kind of feminist things, and getting actual specific actions of getting a new statue put up in Parliament Square, getting a woman on a £10 banknote. That is all done through peer pressure, through social mobilization that's been brought around these central figures within this movement of Caroline Criado Perez and people like that leading these. Okay. So the example I'm just going to talk through very quickly of how can you turn that, and how can we kind of, some of that stuff you can't control. You can't control a lot of what's happening outside. So like the Rashford example, you can't control what the government's going to be doing, but you can start to build that using digital mobilization techniques, which is what we do at Forward Action. So I'm going to talk about an example that we've worked on with Reprieve, who are an organization who didn't have a lot of digital in-house experience and expertise, but they have been working with across the world for a number of years to help support and liberate political prisoners and people who are on death row, particularly trying to rescue, save people who are on death row. So this is an example of an Ethiopian political prisoner, Andy Tsege, and they were able to build this huge movement around him where people were taking action online, contacting the Home Office, signing up to petitions in order to build the pressure to make sure that he was released. So in 2015, Reprieve had half a staff member doing digital. They had no budget, and they had an email list of 1,000 people. So they were relying on social sharing to get people to take action, which was possible in 2015. But I don't know how much you know about social media. The algorithm has changed massively. The way that Facebook, particularly, and a lot of our work is through Facebook. Facebook is kind of very much a monetized platform now, and you have to pay to play. So one of the kind of conversations around funding, if you want to build a movement around your organization, unfortunately, organic growth isn't going to be enough to drive it. So there will need to be investment in actually building that movement around you and using paid social to do that. What Reprieve has always had is a meaningful way for people to get involved, and it's always been urgent asks around kind of petitions to around certain cases, and kind of calling on people to contact their MPs. So real tangible things they can do, but they've also relied on funding as well. So that's what they were doing in 2015. We've worked with them for 5 years, and now we have kind of always on established Facebook campaigns that are recruiting new subscribers, because if you can get people onto your email list, you can go back to them time and time again with more actions for them to take. And when someone comes onto your email list, we work with them to make sure that they're getting great emails, they're getting a really nice onboarding experience, so new subscribers get to hear the best of your organization, and we're contacting them frequently. So we're always giving people actions to take. and we're looking to grow their email list from about 5,000 subscribers a month. So that's kind of the 5-year journey that we've been on with them. If we go on to the next slide. This is just some example of the kind of Facebook ads that we run with them and the testing that we do. So although I say we need investment, or organizations need investment to do this, we're actually looking at a really low cost per email subscriber. So we pay between 35 and 70p for email subscribers off the back of these actions that we ask people to take. And what we ask people to do is to sign up to something with shared values. And so I think with Social Care Future, there's so much potential around kind of what's the shared value. So your vision alone, if you put your vision out there and are able to invite people to add their name to that and sign up to that, you will be able to build a really big, powerful community behind that, which will then help you achieve your aims quicker. So these are some examples of the different kind of ads that we run. We test lots of different things. And then on the next slide, what we do, this is what we ask people to sign up to. So at Forward Action, we create very simple sign up forms. It looks like a petition. It looks like the kind of thing that you would sign on the government website or on something like change.org. But the value is this: you're getting people to opt into your email list. And once someone's on your email list, you can go back to them time and time again. So we're getting people to sign up. And then we're kind of making sure that once people have signed up, we're using them and we're helping them and empowering them to take actions that are going to achieve change, but also to fund the movement, because movements need money to help keep going, because you need to get, the more you're doing in organizing, the more people you want on staff who are able to do this as a full-time commitment so that you can kind of build that momentum. So for every £1 we spent on Facebook adverts, we're seeing with Reprieve, we're making back £4 or £5 in lifetime income. So we want to make sure there's a really positive return on investment here, but that also it's not just about that income from fundraising, but it's about all the actions that those people will take. I think that is everything that I've got on here for digital mobilization. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. So over to me now. It's Martin Routledge for people that don't know me. I'm just going to say a little bit about where we're trying to go from here. Social Care Future has existed for just over 2 years. It feels like we've made quite a good start over those 2 years, but we really need to move into a new league now if we want to have big impact, if we want to really drive fast, big change in social care. And these are just some of the reasons why we think now is really the important moment in time to do this. We think we have something new that can energize people and organizations that are ready for change, but are disappointed by failing strategies. You know, every time you look on Twitter or somewhere, it says, you know, the government hasn't done this, or we haven't managed to do that. Much of that must be because we've not tried the right strategies, and we've got to have better strategies, much more with people at the heart. And we got a vision, and that's quickly built traction, and it's getting all over the place, and it's starting to influence, and it can offer lots of people who really want change a kind of North Star, something to get behind and move towards. As Neil said, the public haven't been engaged by the story that we've been telling to them about social care. But we have shown in the work that Neil and colleagues have done that a new story, well told, can engage them, can change people's minds. And if you don't get the voters to change their minds, you won't get politicians to change their minds. And this could underpin an opportunity for a really big campaign. In Australia, they had Every Australian Counts. That led to a trebling of expenditure on disabled people in Australia. And we're starting to see these campaigns happening in other parts of the world. The new Biden presidency is proposing to put $400 billion into social care, and amazing movements are starting in the US to shift their system. We think also that COVID does change things. I think there's lots of us that are feeling we can't go back to how things were. We have to go forward to a new reality. But there is a risk that in the not too distant future, things will refreeze again around what was before. So we must take the opportunity at this moment when people really want to see something change happen. And it's true that many people who work in councils, who work in support providers, and all sorts of other organisations really do want to be part of a big change, but we have to give them something to get behind. In political terms, in government terms, we are approaching what people are calling a reform moment. There is going to be some new central government policy. Everybody who's seen drafts of the central government policy that's been done so far is extremely disappointed by it. The focus clearly is going to be on people who have houses not having to sell them, and the kind of real basics of the system. But so that's likely to disappoint us, but that gives us an opportunity. We can develop our own version and vision of the future we want, and we can use that to start to influence. We can look for short-term opportunities, and then we can take advantage of things as they develop going forward. I want to put the next slide up, Anna. So as we've said, our kind of strategy for the next stage is to try and build that much bigger, more powerful movement that's got people at its heart, that's got positive, strong ideas for change, and has got thousands and thousands and thousands of people behind it so that it's unstoppable. We need our strong inquiry group. We need to listen and hear from the network, to identify the things that we want to focus on and take action on to change as a movement. We need to bring that to life more. We need a new website that focuses on action and engagement. We need to do the kind of digital engagement that Ali was just talking about, that allows us to get to thousands of people, not hundreds of people. And we need to use that to back supporters to our movement. We're something new, we're something different. We've got a strong story to tell. We've got the beginnings of a strategy. We've got some methods, but we really need to build that bigger now. And that's why we're talking to you and others in our movement at the moment. If you look at the capacity and resources that we've got so far, we've managed to get so far very much on a shoestring. We have 4 conveners who convene and coordinate things on a voluntary basis. We have In Control very kindly offering us a kind of organizational base. But beyond that, we have very little in terms of resource, except when we ask people to help with resource to do things like, for example, the work on public engagement that Neil's talked about, where members of our movement, many of them I'm sure are on here today, came forward and put some money in. So there's different ways in which people can make a contribution. And I see already on the questions, people have been offering their time and their expertise, which is fantastic. So there is that kind of in-kind help. We will need some funding to do things like the digital work, for example, putting a website in place, sponsoring events, etc. You might be able to, if you're an organisation in a position to do that, provide some of that funding. You might be an organisation or someone who has links into funders who might be able to support us. So there's lots of ways in which people can make contributions. It's not just about money, but there is an element of money in this. We've started putting together a kind of list of things that we feel that we need to be able to move forward in this much bigger way. We've started costing those things. So after this webinar, we'll put a note out to everybody who has joined the webinar to kind of share that list to see whether there are things that you think you can help with and support. But we did want to give people a bit of time on the webinar itself to ask any questions or make any suggestions or offer any thoughts. In the questions so far, there have been some people asking questions about how are we engaging with different groups of people, for example, unpaid family carers. And Anna has mentioned that on the inquiry group, there are representatives of unpaid family carers, and we're reaching out through our movement to ask people to engage with people and give us their thoughts and ideas into the inquiry, for example. There was a question about people who don't use words to speak, and we have friends and colleagues in places like Learning Disability England who've been helping people with learning disabilities with all kinds of levels of ability to contribute to us. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing. We're doing it without resources largely and through relationships and through our movement, which is, I think, a massive power of our movement. So sometimes people go shy now, sometimes people jump in straight away and get given their tuppence worth, but you can put questions into the question box, or you can unmute yourself and tell us who you are. Anna, you look horrified.